And joining us today, great to welcome a man who's written a book that is really fascinating, at least to me. I hope to you as well, our listeners here at WTMY. We play the Great American Songbook. This one is called The B-Side, The Death of Tin Pan Alley and the Rebirth of the Great American Song. We're joined today by the author Ben Yagoda from up in Pennsylvania. And Ben, good to have a chance to chat with you today. This, as I said, we play this type of music here at WTMY, so very interested in the history of it, always have been, and I guess that's kind of been a love of yours as well, right?
It has, yeah, and you're keeping up, doing fighting the good fight for playing it, and I'm sure it's not so much of a fight because it's great stuff, and I'm sure people respond to it and love it. It's a great body of work.
Yeah, I grew up, as we talked about before we went on, in New York, and really grew up listening to, I don't know if you had a chance to hear it where you grew up, Ben, but WNEW, 1130 radio, played this type of music.
Oh, I grew up in New Rochelle, New York, so I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, I caught
the WNEW well.
William B. Williams, Ted Brown, Jim Lowe, all those guys, Jonathan Schwartz, and it was a sad day when that station went off the air.
It was, but it's funny you should mention Jonathan Schwartz because he's one of their, as you say, one of their big DJs, and he has continued. He's been one of the most important people in keeping this music alive in various radio spots, including now he's got his own web stream called the Jonathan Channel.
Right.
So it's a great service in what you do as well. There's quite a few outlets out there where it's played, maybe not so much as a mainstream thing anymore, but certainly you can hear this stuff if you're interested in it.
Yeah, you talk about, in the book, about his dad, of course, the great composer Arthur Schwartz, who wrote so many of these Great American Songbook songs in the 20s and 30s and 40s.
Yeah, in fact, Arthur Schwartz was really the start of the book for me. I was kind of, as you say, I like this music so much, I was trying to figure out a way to write about it, and a straight history of it, that had been done. There was not room for another history, but I was reading a book and came upon this lawsuit that Arthur Schwartz filed along with 33 other songwriters in 1953. They filed a $150 million conspiracy suit against the major radio networks and major record companies, alleging that they were conspiring to keep the songs of Arthur Schwartz and these other veteran composers off the air. And that kind of really piqued my interest. And that led me to think about doing a book about not so much the creation of these great songs in the 20s, 30s, 40s, but kind of what happened to end that era, how it came about that it rather abruptly ended. And so that's what really led me on the path to this book.
Yeah, these songs primarily written mid-20s to maybe mid-50s, the bulk of them anyway, and that was the top 40 of its day, but I guess around 1955 or so, maybe a little bit earlier, you can kind of specify that when rock and roll started to creep in, that really was kind of the turning point, was as far as broadcasting this type of music.
Well, the interesting thing to me was that that's kind of the standard interpretation that rock and roll did it in, and certainly rock and roll ultimately did it in, but what I found in doing the research was that there was this interesting period, kind of an interregnum from the late 40s on through the mid to late 50s. I mean, rock and roll didn't really hit till 55 and 56.
Right.
56 when Elvis had 5 #1 hits. But all throughout that period, the earlier period, people were bemoaning the state of American songs. Say, what's going on? Why aren't people writing good songs? There were many articles in Variety and Billboard and these magazines, and no one really knew. And that was the period when Schwartz thought it was a conspiracy. And, there was no conspiracy, just a lot of different things had changed.
Yeah, bulk of these songs came out of Broadway shows in the 20s and 30s, and you talk about in the book World War II, kind of like you said, a turning point as well as far as music. The big band era ended right before the war for the most part, and then after that, like you said, music changed somehow. But that's really the thesis of the book. What exactly happened at that time?
Right, exactly, and it was a lot of things. one of which was the tastes changed. I mean, you mentioned the war. Early on, the people who would ultimately be the soldiers and their girlfriends went out, danced to at jukeboxes or to see the big bands play. And when these guys got home from the war, they were interested in starting families, sitting around. You know, there was this new amazing invention called television that could provide you with entertainment without having to leave the comfort of your living room. And more generally, they were interested in less adventurous, more what later would be called easy listening. So, sentimental ballads and novelty songs like How Much Is That Doggy in the Window, which is the biggest hit of 1953. All these new kind of sounds were crowding out the more traditional jazz-based standards that the Rodgers and Harts and the Cole Porters had written before the war.
Yeah, the novelty tunes. I know you talk about it in the book. Frank Sinatra recorded a couple. He hated it, but he did it. I guess he had to, right? Contractually. Mitch Miller and Frank Sinatra didn't exactly see eye to eye, did they?
No, exactly. Well, Mitch Miller was the producer, and Sinatra later would blame him for the drop off in his career in that period. But the fact is, and he would claim that Miller forced him to perform these novelty numbers like Mama Will Bark and Hucklebuck. The fact is, as Miller responded, that wasn't true. That Sinatra could not be forced to do something he didn't want to. He was so desperate that he said, "Okay, let's give it a try." So yeah, the Mitch Miller Frank Sinatra relationship and feud was a really interesting thing that I didn't really know about till I wrote the book, but provided some great material.
But Frank had other issues as well that probably contributed to a bit of a career lull then. So not just Mitch, but Frank could be a little difficult. So it wasn't just that. He could be
difficult. His personal life was difficult with his relationship with Ava Gardner. His voice was not in good form, and he was in the doldrums. And, But
hard to believe when you think of it.
He bounced back.
Yeah, hard to believe that he was almost, persona non grata for a few years in show business, and that he went that far down.
He really did. And his performance in From Here to Eternity and these great records he started to make with Capitol Records, the arrangements of Nelson Riddle in the mid '50s turned things around. So it became one of the greatest periods, or if not the greatest, of his career.
You can almost, I guess, say he maybe started the resurgence of that type of music as far as recordings go. A lot of the singers were doing the pop novelty tunes, and he said, I'm just going to do what I want to do now. And he was the forerunner of that, wasn't he? Kind of blazed that trail.
I really think that's true. Yeah, I do think that's true. If you look at some of his Capitol records of that period, they're all majority songs that are 15, 20, 30 years old, and he just wanted to pick the best stuff and the best musicians, the best arrangers, and Sinatra, along with people like Ella Fitzgerald, Mel Torme, and some others, really had a lot to do with this music being revived.
Yeah, Mel Torme, another one who was recording some, kind of pop songs for a while. He had great success in the 40s and 50s, but he had a bit of a downturn. I guess Ella Fitzgerald probably didn't suffer it as much. I don't remember her having, at least from her recordings, having to record that type of music. She always seemed to do with the songbooks, right? Norman Granz put her on those.
Before the songbook, you're right. And she had started out with the big band at Chick Webb, and she was at Decca Records, and they gave her some good material. And then she got hooked up with this very important producer, Norman Granz, who loved the standards, and he teamed her with Louis Armstrong for a couple of albums of standards. He did great stuff with Oscar Peterson, Fred Astaire. So, yeah, she was not one of the ones who was forced to do the bad material like a lot of her peers.
You kind of break down the book into different periods as far as the years, decades or even shorter periods, and I guess through the 60s was a bit of a turmoil. Obviously, the Beatles in '64 and all the British invasion and all that kind of changed everything for a while, right, as far as radio and broadcasting of this type of music.
Well, yeah, the Beatles were the kind of ultimate game changer when they hit in '64, the British invasion, Beatlemania, the game was really up as far as the old line songwriters and composers were concerned. But, looked at another way, the Beatles were unbelievable songwriters themselves and had learned from Tin Pan Alley, and they presented another model. They presented a model that was totally unheard of, where the writer would perform his or her own songs. That singer-songwriter model, which is totally, the idea of someone like Sinatra writing his own songs, or Ella Fitzgerald, just would never happen. And that model, among other things that the Beatles did, reinvigorated songwriting. So you have like a Brian Wilson for the Beach Boys, or later a Joni Mitchell writing songs for themselves and really writing magnificent songs.
Yeah, it's true. I guess there's a couple of composers that were successful. So Johnny Mercer might be the most successful as far as singing some of the stuff he wrote, but he really wasn't to be a singer, but he was a pretty good one. But yeah, you're right. The performer, singer, writer combination, I guess Billy Joel, you could probably put him in that category as well, right?
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, Johnny Mercer is interesting because he started out as a professional singer, and he performed his own and other people's work. He was a wonderful singer. Harold Arlen also performed his material. He was a great singer, but that wasn't the primary means by which it was disseminated. The model that the Beatles, in that regard, were going after was the blues musicians or Robert Johnson, or a Hank Williams, or Jimmy Rogers, country singers that would sing and perform their own songs. They were very important in that singer-songwriter model as well.
Yeah. Well, it's a fascinating book. I know we have limited time today, Ben, but anybody who is appreciative of the Great American Songbook, you get some great history here in the book. The songwriters, the teams of songwriters. I guess primarily Broadway back in the day, and through the movies, and then up to today. It's called The B-Side. And Ben, do you have a website you want to give out? People can get a hold of the book or get a hold of you.
I sure do. Thank you for asking. It's benyagoda.com, and there's a lot of material related to the book and other things that didn't quite make it into the book. So I recommend people checking it out if they're interested.
Great. I know you're going on a book tour, and to see your schedule here, so good luck with that. And if you're ever down here in Florida, please look us up. But love to have you on again down the road. Thanks for joining us.
I sure will. Thank you so much.
If you'd like to order the book we're talking about, please go to DougMilesMedia.com and enter the author's name in the Amazon search box. Thank you for listening. Please come back soon for more conversations here at DougMilesMedia.com. This has been a presentation of Doug Miles Media, all rights reserved. You can listen to or download previous programs at iTunes, Stitcher.com, or Doug Miles.